Hi, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to my weekly podcast about spirituality, love, death, devotion, and waking up while living in a messy world. The Satsang with Shambhavi podcast is recorded live each week with students of our nonprofit community, Jayakula. For more information and to find out about attending a satsang, visit jayakula.org. Thanks for listening. Much love to you, wherever and however you are.
So I just recently talked to a Chinese astrologist, and she mentioned the element metal. And the one thing that she talked about was just being precise and refined. And I was wondering if this tradition speaks about precision and being refined and precise.
So I've actually talked a lot about that. And it's not something that I've read in texts of the tradition, but it's something that I have understood through my own practice. And there are several sort of layers of precision that, like everything else, are more or less imbued with the full expression of wisdom. For instance, one of the forms of precision is perfectionism, which I think someone asked me a question about last time. And perfectionism is precision under tension, under the tension of the fear of being criticized. So when we are perfectionists, we are trying to stave off being criticized. And in fact, of course, many people who have this karmic pattern will criticize other people. They get out ahead of the curve by trying to do everything perfectly and then criticizing other people for not doing things perfectly. That's an aspect of precision, but it's stepped down. It's not in its full flower. And then what happens is when you're a perfectionist, if you do feel that you've made a mistake, you go into a tailspin, a huge overreaction, and a fear of what the repercussions of not having done something perfectly are going to be. So there's a lot of fear of making mistakes among people who have the form of precision we call perfectionism. Then you could say there's ordinary precision. Ordinary precision comes out of what my Dzogchen teacher calls ordinary presence. So ordinary presence is you simply know where you are and what you're doing. You're not lost in thoughts of past, present, or future unrelated to what you're doing. So your attention is on what is actually happening right now. That's what's called ordinary presence. And of course, many of us lose ordinary presence very, very, very often because we're thinking about something from the past or we're worrying about something in the present. We're having imaginary conversations with people, etc., in our lives, trying to relieve tension about our relationships and things like that. And then there's also future thinking. Many people are lost in fantasies of we call planning. They're overthinking what is going to happen in the future. They fear about the future. So when we are having that kind of an experience, of course, which is extremely common, then we are not being in ordinary presence and we cannot be precise. We can't take care of things in the most skillful way because our full attention is not on those things. We have lapses. Now, we could say there's something else, which I'm just making this up on the spot, so don't take me too seriously, but what we could call enlightened precision. Enlightened precision doesn't have anything to do with wanting to be thought well of. It's also not a product of focusing on what's happening right now in an ordinary way, although that's part of it. Where enlightened precision comes from is from a complete focus on the well-being of other people. It's from wanting the best for others. And this enlightened precision takes into account many, many more people and circumstances and possibilities than ordinary presence. You know, ordinary presence is, I don't really want to cut myself with this knife that I'm chopping this scallion with, this green onion. So I'll pay attention to it. That's ordinary presence. But while you're chopping the scallion, you're not really thinking about who made the scallion, who might eat the scallion. Is the scallion the best thing for all the people that might come into contact with it? Is it going to look beautiful and please the people so that they feel taken care of? You're just thinking, I don't want to cut myself. So there's still a narrower focus. Whereas enlightened perfection, the focus is very, very large. You're thinking about all the people and beings who are going to be affected and how can you best take care of them so that they have the best possible experience and hopefully more possibility to realize. This is why you see teachers, who have big organizations, they do a lot of activity, being very involved in the day-to-day workings of their organizations. Or Ananda Mayama, when there was a puja, she would come and supervise every detail, not because she was a picky so-and-so, but because she wanted people to have the best experience. She wanted everything to be of most benefit for others. And this is actually the source of what I'm on the fly calling enlightened precision. It comes only from the heart, and it's effortless. It's effortless. It's not something that requires you to put in any kind of sick effort to achieve.
I was actually having a conversation with a friend today about being strong, and through our conversation, we actually were like, well, what does strength mean? It kind of innately implies weakness. And then it just made me start thinking about what is strength? What is staying strong? Being receptive and listening feels like a really strong place to be. Mm-hmm. But I feel like my mind has been so conditioned to what is strong and strength. So I'd love you to talk about that.
That's a great question. There's no approach or no attitude or no kind of activity that is ever the right thing in all circumstances. So any conventional ideas we have about strength are only effective qualities or effective actions to undertake in certain circumstances. In other circumstances, taking a very soft, yielding position. I'm just speaking in conventional terms now. So in other circumstances, taking a soft, yielding position is the most skillful thing to do. So one of the aspects, or the most important aspect when we talk about strength or any actions we might take, is adaptability. We have to understand that there's no one way to be strong or one way to yield. That adaptability, which is also based in presence and in really feeling what's happening, being immersed in what's happening and being able to respond to it, and not being caught up in rigid ideas about things, rigid definitions, or attachments to appearing in the world a certain way. On a deeper level, in terms of our sadhana, or just being effective human beings, I can just speak from my own life that what takes the most strength from me is continually remembering in an embodied way that everything is fine. Continually remembering that what I'm doing here is God's play. That is very difficult. That's very difficult. So it takes a lot of strength, inner resourcefulness to continually go back to whatever experience you have of the natural state and continually take refuge in that, even when, your karmas want to drag you off in a different direction. That takes real fortitude. I would say fortitude is a very important word. Patience takes strength. Being really honest with yourself takes strength. Being honest with other people and letting the cards fall where they may takes strength. These are all tools and ways of being in the world that are absolutely essential if we want to find out who we really are and what the heck's really happening here, which is what I want. I just would want to say fortitude. That feels like a better word to me. The strength that's needed by a practitioner seems more like fortitude to me. And then that is so applicable to so many different ways that we might be in the world, whether they're yin or yang. I'll just mess traditions here, pour one into another. One of the great lessons also is that sometimes it calls for us to move aggressively, and sometimes it calls for us to do nothing, and sometimes it calls for us to walk very softly. And most of us have a predilection for one way of being versus another. For instance, my survival when I was a child was to just barrel through everyone and say, you can't stop me. I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to get what I want. I'm going to live the life I want. You can't stop me. Whereas other people's method is to more sit back and try to become invisible and slide behind the scenes to get what they want. So, we all have different methods and that we've learned over time, different karmic habit patterns. And so we have a preference for being more aggressive or being less aggressive, trying to move forcefully or trying to slide by. And we have to unlearn that stuff because there's never any one method that's good for all circumstances. Like if we want to actually be skillful, we have to unlearn our predilections. We have to unlearn our tendencies so that we have the whole range of possible strength of, I'll just say yin and yang because it makes more sense. But, the whole possible range of motion can be ours. And this gets to the whole point of the practice. We have this word called swatantriya. It's loosely translated in all of the academic texts as freedom. But the only freedom that we really have is freedom of expression. So that is God's freedom, the freedom to express, to create, to move in any way, to show up in any way. And this is what we're slowly moving toward, to have that full range of expression rather than being stuck in like one or two or three modes and then moving through life in a very clumsy, unskillful way and stale way. We want to have as much nuance, as much range so that we can fluidly adapt to things. And this is also why we follow, that the practice has a lot to do with listening and following, because in doing that, that kind of gets the stuckness out of our lives so that we become more spacious actors in the world. We get experience. The teacher says do this, but then the next day they say do the opposite. They say, for instance, we're going to move here, but then later they move somewhere else. And this all has to do with fluidity and adaptability. This is our main skill. So having said that, in relation to your question about strength, some people think that, if we use the ideas of yin and yang, that yang, the more forceful aspect, some people think they're equal, but they're not. Yin is actually more powerful than yang. This is the Taoist teaching, because yin has to do with adaptability. And that is the bottom line to freedom of self-expression, is the ability to adapt skillfully and joyfully and playfully, not just skillfully. Have fun doing it. I think that game apps are somewhat apropos, some of them, because you're just kind of meandering along and stuff happens and you have to adapt very quickly. And different skills are called into play at different times. Of course, it's all very aggressive, so that part of it doesn't really fit. But as Ma said, no metaphor is ever complete. Take from it what you can. But there is a feeling, I don't know how many people have played these games, but there's a feeling of kind of a dance-like fluidity where you're just, the fun of it is to adapt to these surprising things that happen. And we want to have that quality in our everyday lives. That's what we are here for, to have that experience of unconditioned adaptability. So in that sense, yin, the adaptable, more water, flowy aspect, is the primary strength. And of course, water will cut rock. You can throw as many rocks as you want at a river. It might create a dam, but it's not going to destroy the river. It'll just be a temporary dam because eventually the water will take the dam away if left to its own devices. So the lessons that I've been learning over the last 35 or so years are about waiting for the right time, feeling for the right way to move, listening for the time when the instructions actually come, and adapting to circumstances that aren't always, what I thought I wanted. And from that, slowly over time, freedom arises.
Is there a part in the view that fun has a place in?
Fun?
Yeah.
Yeah. The whole thing is fun, ultimately. Look around the room. There's all these colors and all these forms and all these different ways that God is appearing just in this one room. So your whole lived existence becomes an appreciation of that. What do you mean by fun?
The first thing that comes to mind is being out surfing in warm water with friends, and that to me is fun.
Well, the fact that you even can have fun is a gateway, as long as you don't get too attached to one particular definition of fun or types of fun that are numbing. God is having fun. I mean, I would probably put it a different way if I were using my own words, but God is having fun. God is in a state of profound enjoyment. And all of the enjoyments that we have, even the most degraded ones, are aspects of God's enjoyment, just a little squished or stepped down or, with some key things dropped out. The idea is not that we're giving up fun, but that we're giving up our rigidity and only being able to have fun a few different ways.
How do you know that it's made out of fun?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you know
that God is in a state of enjoyment?
Yeah.
I mean, I would say enjoyment, playfulness.
Okay.
How do I know that? I've directly perceived it. I have seen it, felt it. I see it in Ma. I see it in the way Lord Krishna is portrayed in the Mahabharata. But I've also just seen it directly. The enjoyment seems to be, first of all, just this amazed enjoyment of the inexhaustible nature of the self and its inexhaustible creativity. So when you're out there surfing with your friends, that isn't you. That is that supreme self creating that circumstance out of its own body and enjoying it. But it's also enjoying things you don't enjoy. For instance, if a painter paints something, a beautiful painting of the ocean, beautiful light, beautiful waves, and then they paint another painting, which is a painting of people killing each other in a war. They don't then say, I hate this painting of war that I made. It's so depressing. It really isn't fun at all. I think I'm just going to look at my painting of the ocean because that painting is fun. No, the artist might appreciate both of those. Might appreciate the creativity and artistry and depth and nuance of both of those paintings. But there's also a quality of amazement, like as if reality just can't get over how great it actually is.